hazards also. So we tried to get rid of physical hazards and chemical hazards and biological hazards so that we could do the same thing. Well-being would be better, safety would be better, efficiency would be more. So this is about the ergonomical hazards. But in this case, the difference is that many of these ergonomic issues are something which we can say that it's a matter of common sense. For example, all of you use a pen, ballpoint pen or pencil or whatever, something to write with. Now, if I want to make a big scientific study to see what is the ideal size of that diameter of the pen which we hold, you will find that if you do a huge study, measured for 10,000 of people, ultimately we'll get something what you are using now. Because we know that if the pen is much thinner than what we are using, like writing with a refill. You can write, but quickly your fingers will get fatigued. Also, if it's a very thick pen, for example, it's something like let's say a bat, cricket bat or something like cricket bat handle. You try to write with something which is so wide. You can still write, but you can't get a good handwriting. So, after so many years of trial and error, we've identified that this is the right diameter for a pen. So, what is great about it? What is there to know about ergonomics? Point is that there are many situations where we can't do this trial and error thing. For example, sending a spaceship, some astronaut in a spaceship to the moon or somewhere outside. Then we can't say, okay, we'll do it this way. If it doesn't work, we'll send up somebody else. That's not possible. So, when we want a proper performance, well-being, safety, efficiency from that astronaut, we must apply some scientific knowledge. See to it that he does his best. His health is not affected. His safety is not affected. He can do the job well. And that's when we apply scientific knowledge for that, that is ergonomics. Another way of looking at ergonomics is fitting the job to the man. Instead of fitting the man to the job, we try to see how the job can be changed so that it will fit the man. Our problem, I said, we have a problem with body size, we have a problem with applying forces, we have a problem with lifting loads, we have a problem with working with computers, and sometimes the work situation is so stressful, we are simply not able to cope with it. How we can design it in such a way that people can do the job better. And lastly, just I want to tell you that in many places, what we are talking about as ergonomics is also called as human factors. So mainly in America, they call it human factors, but basically it's the same thing. Whether you're talking about ergonomics or you're talking about human factors, both are one and the same. And in recognition of that, now people have started saying ergonomics, human factors, or human factors and ergonomics together, so that the understanding is that it's all one and the same. So that's enough for definition. But who is enough? Who does this work? Do you have a separate training? Do you need to study ergonomics separately as a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or something else after that? No. Anybody can be an ergonomist. And ergonomists can be engineers, can be ergonomists, doctors can be ergonomists, physiologists like me can be an ergonomist, psychologists can be ergonomists, people doing physiotherapy can be ergonomists, and people from so many areas which are related can be ergonomists. So we say that ergonomics is a multidisciplinary subject because from different disciplines people can contribute and they can contribute in their own way. You can't say that because I'm a physiologist, I'm an ergonomist. Engineers, he can't say that I'm an ergonomist. Everybody is an ergonomist. And as you will see that whichever area you go into after you finish school and college, ergonomics is going to be with you. And whatever you hear today, you'll be able to realize it. When you go to the lab, when you go to the workshop as an engineer, go to the lab as a science student, do whatever you do, when you use a computer, you find that there will be some part of your life which will be affected by ergonomics. But why do we need it? If you don't have it, what happens? I give the example of going to the moon. Everybody doesn't go to the moon. We are happy with what we have here, like the pen. We can do with trial and error. But that's not always the problem. There are three reasons why we need ergonomics and why it's very important. First is that these problems take a long time to develop. Like I told you for occupational health, by the time you've realized it, discovered that you have the problem, usually it's too late to do anything about it. So that's why we must know from the beginning that this is going to happen and we should be able to prevent it. Like it's an occupational health hazard also, one of the four. So we need to have a preventive, remember, recognition, evaluation, control. So this is part of it. Second is that the effects are not so easily related to the causes. In the case of the other occupational diseases, I said, okay, you have this gas, you will have that problem. You inhale this metal, you get exposed to that chemical, you will have that problem. You get exposed to this virus, you will get that disease. In this case, it's not always so easy to relate that if this is the reason, that's going to happen. So that's why you need to have a scientific knowledge, proper scientific knowledge about it. If you are going to do the first one, if you are going to do this prevention, recognition, evaluation, control, you should know what is going to cause what. And most importantly, many of these problems happen in unexpected and stress situations. So people can be using a particular system or a machine very nicely year after year, but at a particular moment when there's a stress situation, in an emergency condition, people may just do the wrong thing and then we say it's a human error accident. So one of the major purposes of ergonomics is to avoid this human error accident by knowing what is likely to happen when the person gets under stress, what can happen because of human error. So these are the three reasons why we need ergonomics urgently. Let's go straight into the subject. First, I said, out of those first of those five were problems of body size. So everybody has got different body sizes. For example, this gentleman, he has got a particular height, and problem is that he is required to operate this machine. Now, if he comes close to this machine and reaches for these buttons, which are very high for his height, not only is he find it difficult to reach it, he's going to find it difficult to look at these numbers on this display, because even from here it finds it difficult. If he comes close to this, he's going to find it even more difficult. So he's going to have a problem. So like that, there are so many situations where we are going to have a problem because of our different body sizes. So what can we do about it? So people will say that if I want to design something which will suit everybody, we need to design for the average person. Now that is absolutely wrong. Should never, never, never design for the average person. Why not? Sounds very stupid. You should not, people will think that yes, that's what you should do. You should design for the average people. But no, you'll understand in a moment. Supposing I want to design a door. Okay, let's say this door. Now if I design the height of this door for an average Indian, what will happen? Only the people up to average height will be able to pass through this door properly. Remember, average is middle. So half of the people won't be able to go through this door properly. So they have to bend their head or they'll hit their head on the door because you have designed for the average person. So what you should do? You should design this door for the tall person, because a door through which a tall person can go, all short people can go also. So we have one size which will fit all. So this is one approach. One size fits all. So what is the size? In this case, you must find out who's going to have the problem. That is the critical question. Who will have the problem? In case of the door, it's the tall person who will have the problem. So we design for him. Now supposing I have an emergency stop switch in a machine. Say this one. This is an emergency stop switch. Now who will have the problem? The short person will have the problem, because it's at a very height. So if we put the stop switch at a height where all the short people can reach, then all the tall people will also be able to reach it. So that's my approach to one size fits all. We find out who has the problem and design my door or my machine or my chair or my whatever it is that way. So that is one approach, but this doesn't suit everybody. For example, think of a chair. Now, if a chair is too low, tall people are going to have problems. They have to bend their leg and sit down low. If the chair is too high, that also becomes a problem. The short people, their legs will hang from the chair and they won't be able to get in or get out easily. So for those situations, we need to have adjustable equipment. Chair is the best example of adjustability, where you need to do for both short people as well as tall people. So there are other examples, but chair is something which you should it will find it easy to remember. So that's the second approach. First one was one size fits all. If you can't do that, then we can go for adjustability. But there's a third situation where neither this one size fits all will work, nor the adjustability will work. And that is something which is very common to all of you. That is your clothes. In case of clothes, we need different sizes. I can't have one big size in say XL or 2XL and everybody will fit into that. It's ridiculous. You can't have it that way. So you must have different sizes for different people. And obviously you can't have adjustable clothes. So like that, this is for clothes. Same thing happens for shoes, anything of personal use, shoes, gloves, and protective equipment like helmets. So you can't have an adjustable helmet. You can't have a big shoe in which everybody will fit. So this is the third approach. So according to what is required, whether it is something of personal requirement, then we have the different sizes. If something where both ranges will have difficulty, we can have adjustability. But in most of the situations, we can do the first one, that is have one size fits all. But we must think of who's going to have difficulty. Never design for the average. That is the take-home message from this first point. We should never design for the average person. Second, about lifting loads. When we lift loads, what are the problems human beings have? Well, think of this person. I showed this picture in the previous day when we were talking about load lifting. Now, when this person lifts the load, all the force with which this particular load is lifted, so when he straightens his back, the load will get lifted and then he has to keep it here. So when he straightens his back, the force comes from the muscles of the back here. So these muscles have to contract and make him stand straight. Now what happens is that this is something like a seesaw. The force is on one side and the weight is the other side, and this always works like a seesaw. It has to be balanced. Those of you who have learnt about levers in school know that lever is something like this. There is a fulcrum in the middle and there's a load on one side and the force on the other side, and this force into this load distance and this load into this distance have to be equal. In case of the body, if the person who was building the previous picture, these muscles were there in the back and the force, the object which he was lifting was over here and he has to lift it. If you look at it, just for a second, look at it from a point of view of maths, this load which he is lifting into the distance which is away from, which it is away from the body, like in the previous picture was about 70 centimeter and it was about a 10 kg load. But the muscle is only 5 centimeters from the spinal cord, right on your back. So if you solve this equation, you find that just to lift a 10 kg load in the posture in what I showed you in the previous picture, the muscle of the back has to exert a force of 140 kg. This huge force has to be exerted by the muscle just to lift the 10 kg load. But we can do something about it. If we can change the posture so that the distance is reduced, instead of 70 we can make it 50 or 40. Then without changing everything, just by changing the posture in which he is lifting the load, we can reduce the force which the muscle has to do. So it's like this. As the object comes closer and closer, effectively the load becomes smaller and smaller. So when it's very close to the body, it's like a very small load. As it goes away from the body, effectively the load increases. The actual force which has to be developed to lift that load increases with the force at the muscles. So the muscles have to do much more work when the load in distance increases. So take home message from this slide is that the weight of the load and the distance from the body are equally important. So whenever you think, in future, whenever you think of lifting a heavy load, try to bring it as close to your body as possible. So if you see porters in the railway station, a porter will never hold a suitcase in his hand. He will always try to put it on his head because that brings the load very close to his body. That's it. So try to do it yourself. Keep the load as close to your body as possible, so that the same load will require less effort from your side to lift it. So that is the second take-home point. First take-home point was that never design for the average. Second one was that the weight of the load and distance are equally important. So keep the load close to your body. Let's go to the third one. When we apply forces. This is a big problem. In fact, this is the biggest ergonomics problem in the world right now. This is because our body is designed in such a way that we have a lot of problems in applying forces in the way in which our workplace is designed, the way the machinery is designed, the way our hand tools are designed. We find it very difficult to apply forces very easily. Look at this picture. This picture says that somebody is holding his hand up and he has made a fist. Try to do it yourself. Just try to hold your hand up and make a fist and exert force. You see, these muscles are contracting. Try to make your muscles contract and exert as much force as you can. Do it. And feel how much force you are able to do. And now, just move your wrist back or front and you will see that that force will disappear. When you move your hand forwards, it will come down to half. And if you move your wrist backwards, there won't be any force at all. You can only exert the force when this wrist is straight, because all the muscles with which you are exerting this force are here. And this has to go through this wrist. So if you bend the wrist backwards, there is such a disadvantage that most of the force can't reach the fingers. Even if you bend it forwards, the same problem happens. Why does this happen? Because inside the wrist, we have all these things, the small space of the wrist. This is the hand, and this is the opposite of this. These muscles are here, and the fingers are here. So over here, we have the nerves, the blood vessels, the muscles, the tendons, everything is going through this small space. It's a real big space problem. So as long as the wrist is straight, whatever force the muscles are generating can go to the fingers. The moment you have bent the wrist, then the problem happens. The force can't be exerted. Why do you bend the wrist? To keep the wrist straight. That's, as you will see, almost impossible to do in today's situation. We'll see it now. Other thing which can happen is that even without force, if there's a lot of repetitive motion, then also these things can brush against each other. And that also can create a problem. So one is repetition, the other is exerting force with the bent wrist. Both of these things are a problem. So applying forces with bent wrist, repetitive work, and bad posture. For example, you have to do the job above your head, some work on your ceiling or something above your head. And most of this problem is because of the hand tools, as I'll show you just now. So unfortunately, also, most of these bad conditions happen together. For example, a typical thing which you will find it easy to remember is this clothes wringing motion. What happens when you try to squeeze the water out of a cloth after washing it? So, you see, this hand is bent in one particular direction, the other hand is bent in the other direction. So, the two examples I gave, one wrist bent backwards, one wrist bent forward, everything is happening over here. So this wrist is bent, the other wrist is also bent in the opposite direction. So all these things are happening in the same job. So when you dry your clothes after washing, why don't you get a problem? Because you don't do it as part of your job. If you're doing it as part of your occupation, that you're doing it 8 hours a day, day after day, week after week, month after month, definitely you're going to have a major problem in your hands and wrists. Now what happens is that many of the jobs which you are forced to do, these things happen together. You see this wrist, it is bent in this direction. You see this wrist, it is bent in this direction. The force has to be applied, and this has to be done about 3 or 4 times a minute. That means about 200 times an hour for the entire working period. So the applying forces with bent wrist, repetition, continuously it is being done, and definitely there becomes a problem of different types of problems will happen in the wrist. What type of problems we need not go into. Lots of problems can happen, but all of them are because the wrist is not straight and because there is repetition. Now, this hand tools force us to do it. For example, this is a pliers. And if you hold the pliers like this, the wrist will be bent. You see, this bent wrist. From today, just after finishing this class, Just start looking at all the hand tools which you use. Screwdriver, hammer, pliers, even the whatever your mother uses for cooking, anything, any kind of hand tool, whatever you use, you see that when you are applying force at that moment, the wrist will always be bent because the tool is straight. In order to, our hand is designed in such a way that if you hold the tool which is straight, our wrist will be bent, and that causes all these problems of these tendons, blood vessels, nerves going through this wrist, as I showed you in that picture. What to do about it? Now, if you apply ergonomics, the tool can be redesigned by bending the tool so that the wrist is straight. So that is the take-home message from this point, is that we need to keep the wrist straight for whatever we do, whether it is hand tools or applying any kind of job, for example, carpentry, cutting wires, assembly work as in this picture, or cooking, or even playing musical instrument. For example, this can happen when people are the repetition like playing tabla or playing the guitar. So people, musical instrument players have a lot of problems like this, because when they're applying, it's not that they apply force. In case of tabla, force is also applied, but there is a bent wrist. So in case of tabla, it's a particularly double danger, because bent wrist and repetition both are happening together. So take home message from this part of the slide is that try to see how far we can keep the wrist straight. There are many ways of doing it, but the problem is that if there's a problem when doing work, it's often because the tool is forcing the wrist to be bent. So a better tool will be such that you can keep the wrist straight. Okay, so this is about the body. We'll go to the fourth point. Fourth point is even more interesting. This is about how people design, the engineers design things, but they don't always think of how the human beings are going to use it. For example, let's take a simple example. Now, this is a fan regulator. I want to increase the speed of the fan. Which direction to increase? Almost all of you will agree, I think not almost, in fact 100% will agree that you need to turn it to the right. That is what we call clockwise, in the direction of the clock, so that it will increase. No, there won't be any difference of opinion about that. But think, do you always do that? Whenever you want to increase something, do you always turn the control to the right? When I say control, I mean something with which we are conveying our ideas to whatever the system or a machine. For example, a mouse or a mobile phone, all these things, I press a button, I want to do something. I tell the machine to do something. Similarly, I want to increase the speed of the fan, so this is a control. So like that, is there a control which we do the opposite thing when I want to increase? Yes, there is. And you use it every day. That's the tap. In a tap, you do exactly the same thing to reduce the water. So you turn it in the right direction, that is clockwise direction, to reduce the water. Now supposing somebody designed it ulta, you turn the fan regulator in the left direction to increase, and you turn the tap in the right direction to increase. In that case, everybody is going to have a problem, because it's not as per our expectation. So what is this expectation? How did we get this expectation? These expectations are what in ergonomics we call stereotype. This is something which is expected of a person. So a designer, he should be very careful that when he designs something, it should be as per what the user is going to expect. If the user expects that this, if I do this, this will happen, then the machine should be designed in such a way that if I do that, that happens. If it doesn't happen, then it becomes a problem. But it's not as easy as the way I said it, because these stereotypes vary from place to place. Many of the stereotypes, not all, some of the stereotypes vary from place to place. Such as a very common control of these power switches. In India and in England, power switches are like this. That means they are, if you want to switch them on, you have to move them downwards. And this means all these three switches are in the off position. So this is a stereotype. If it is opposite, then you're going to have a problem. If this means that these switches are on, that means definitely somebody has fixed the switch in wrong direction, wrong way. A stupid electrician. But in America and Europe, it's just like that. If it is down, then it's off. If I want to turn it on, I have to move it up. That's what they expect. So in India and England, we expect something. In America and Europe, they expect something else. So what is the designer going to do? Designer has to he has to design for that particular group of people, or for example, if I'm an exporter, I design a machine which I'm going to export. I don't know which country I'm going to export to. I don't know what is going to be their stereotype. So how can I put a switch on that? I must do something using ergonomic principles so that people won't make a mistake. How can we do it? We can have zero error by, first of all, marking on and off. Instead of saying ON and OFF, problem is that I may not be exporting to a country which knows English. They may be Chinese, or Japanese, or Korean, or African, or whatever it is. So I use internationally accepted symbols. This is 1 and this is 0, or straight line and circle. This is off, this is on, and I have a small light or an LED inside the switch so that once it is on, the light will be on also. So nobody will make a mistake whether the switch is on or off, either from the lighting or specifically from the light. So this is one way in which you can use ergonomics to help people to remember. So that is the third take-home message from this. I will try to stress this more because this is so important, and in so many real-life situations, this is not done that you will be surprised. So stereotype is something which we expect, and if the design is not matching what we are expecting, it's a big problem. Let's take one more big problem from stereotype. That is door handle. Again, almost all of you will say, if I want to open the door, I pull the handle downwards. Maybe most of you will pull the door towards you. Some of you may even push the door away from you. But mostly you will pull it towards you. But everybody will turn the door handle downwards. There's no doubt about it. This is a very clear-cut stereotype, and it doesn't vary from country to country. It is something which is universal. Everybody expects this. But is it there everywhere? No. It's a big no. See this. This is a fire engine, and in the driver's door, the handle moves upwards to open. So many people have had this problem that somebody said that they should put this arrow here so that people don't make a mistake. So if you come to this fire engine and you want to get in, then you see the arrow, you turn it upwards to open. No problem. But remember what I said? What are the situations why we need ergonomics? What was the third one? I said in case of emergencies or in case of something unusual, unexpected. Now a fire engine is definitely used in case of an emergency. So if there's a fire at night and you're trying to get into the fire engine, drive the fire engine off to the fire, what happens? You try and come and try to open the door, and instead of open the door, you think it's locked. And because it's dark, you can't see this wonderful arrow which is marked there. So what the designer should have done. Now why whoever designed this put the door like this is a different story. There are so many reasons for it, and it's too long a story for this class. But there are reasons. Whoever is not a fool. Whoever designed it like this didn't do it because he was a stupid idiot. He did it because he had some other way of thinking, which doesn't match what is the expectation of the user. So when the expectation of the user and the thought process of the person who designed it don't match, there is this human error conflict which ergonomics tries to solve. So this door is a very bad idea. It's an example of bad ergonomics where it should not be there. In emergency vehicles, it should always match with the stereotype. Okay. The other situation where we can, in a control display situation, we can use ergonomics to help is when there is a very complex human-machine interface. Interface means something which is between. Let's take these two examples. The top one is an operation theater, and the operation is going on here, and this is the person who is doing the anesthesia. So the anesthesia this is the anesthesia machine, and all the gas controls and all the body parameters, and he is writing down everything, he is watching so that everything is correct, and according to the phase of the operation, according to what the surgeon tells him, he has to control the gases and put the person deep into anesthesia, maintain him at that level, and take the patient out of anesthesia once the operation is over. So it's a very complex situation. He's getting inputs from these controls here, from these machines here, from his computer, from these alarms, and from what the doctors are saying. So many people are giving inputs, and he has to perform his best perfectly, otherwise the patient is going to die. So in this situation, ergonomics has to help him to sort out all these inputs which are coming, something like a display. So it's a display or an input which is coming, and identify how he has to act. So we have to help him to utilize this information properly so that he can have proper efficiency. So, and his well-being also, because if he is continuously working at a high-stress job, he is going to have problems also. So we don't want that to happen. So his well-being, but more importantly, his efficiency. The same thing happens in this control room. So if you see this one operator is there, he has to see this feeds from this 1, 2, 3, 4. This display has got 4 CCTVs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 CCTVs, which is giving him feed. He gets input from 2 computers, which tell him what the system is doing. And he has so many switches, and then there are some alarm signals here. So he has to monitor. On top of that, sometimes he has a view of the actual operation directly. So with all these inputs, he has to be on his toes so that if any of the parameters change, he has to correct it then and there. Otherwise, again, there's going to be a problem. What kind of problem? There could be a fire, an explosion, some kind of problem can be there, and he has to always immediately take corrective action in such a problem where there is a complex set of information coming to him. So how can ergonomics help? As I said, ergonomics can help by prioritizing this information, making it usable. Ultimately, that is what ergonomics is about. It makes things usable for you. So how can we do that? First of all, sometimes we have a lot of information, more information than we actually need. For example, if there's a car, if you have a car and you're riding in a car and the car gives you information that the engine is at 100 degrees centigrade or 100 degree Fahrenheit or 200 degree Fahrenheit, whatever it is. You don't know whether it's cold or hot. But instead of that, instead of the actual number, if there's a color coding, it tells you that 200 is absolutely okay and 100 is cold. So what you need to do is see to it that it doesn't go into the red zone and avoid the yellow zone as much as possible. So it makes the information straight away usable. So this is one thing we can do using color coding. Second thing which we can do is use the information, present the information in a more usable way, like digital information. So this is what is called as analog information instead of analog. So if it's difficult to read this, so you can, but easy to read this. So again, difficult to read from this meter, but the 6.43 is easy to read. But don't get carried away. Digital displays are not always better. In fact, digital displays are only useful when you need the exact number or when you have to write it down. Most of these situations in these 2 meters, what I show you, you need the exact number. What is the battery voltage? What is the resistance? What is the temperature? All these things are the exact value you need, and so most of the time you have to write it down. But if you don't need to do this, if you don't need to write it down, or if you don't need the exact value, then it's not a very good idea. For example, this is a digital clock, and it says 13:32:57. But I don't need to know whether it is 13:32:57. I don't need the exact value of the time. I don't need to write it down. I need to know how many minutes are left before this class is over. So even without the numbers, this clock is equally good because I just want to see the angles of the hands. I want to see that there are about 6 minutes left. For example, if this was 5:30, maybe about 3 minutes left, 3 or 4 minutes left for it to be 5:30. And if it showed the same thing in digits, I would have to do some mental mathematics to do this calculation. So that becomes a problem. So everything is not always good. Information should be presentable in a way in which we can use it. For example, which of these dials are okay? Now, it looks like these two dials are not okay, but you don't know it unless you know for sure what is the normal operating position of these dials. So if you're in a control room situation and you're asked to keep an eye on it, and whenever something goes wrong, call somebody or do something, you will find it difficult unless you have a lot of training. How can I help you? First way in which I can help you by giving color coding. If I say that this is normal for each of these, then straight away you can find that this one and this one, you confirm what you thought here, that yes, this dial, this one and this one are out. But still you have to look at each dial one by one. When it's 9 dials, it's okay. If it's 100 dials, it takes a lot of time. And if you're busy with something else, talking to somebody, if you've got a fever, you're listening to some cricket commentary, or more importantly, if there's an emergency situation. In these situations, this is of partial help. What can we do? We can use something which human beings can do very well. That is pattern recognition. We can recognize patterns very well. So we can, instead of keeping them this way, we can just turn the dials so that all of them face in one particular direction when they are in OK. So what you have to do, just scan for straight lines. So if there are even 100 or even 200 dials, you just go through it very quickly with your eyes, scanning for straight lines. And you can find the break in the straight line right away. In fact, you can be further helped by just joining these parts. So you can see that there's a continuous line here and the line is broken here and here. This is way in which we can use ergonomics to help people perform better in a very complex situation. Also, when there is additional stress on them, they're doing something else, or if it's an emergency situation. So, what is the point from this? Remember, but apart from this, the information should be useful, presented in a useful way, and more importantly, the stereotype, what people are expecting, that should be there in the design. Finally, we will look at computers very quickly because it's so obviously they're everywhere. For example, this person is using a computer. What's the problem? Problem is this: the edge of the table is always brushing against his wrist, and over a period of time, he is going to have a very, very sore wrist. And all those, remember all those things which were passing through the wrist, the nerves, blood vessels, tendons, everything, definitely all of them are going to be affected. And very soon he will be running to the doctor saying that I've got a problem in my hand. But the doctor won't say that the problem in the hand is because of the table. He won't be able to relate the cause to the effect. So that's why you need ergonomics to see that this kind of sharp edges are not there. Same thing can happen for this gentleman. He'll come and say that, doctor, I work with computers, I've got a neck problem. But unless you are able to analyze this in an ergonomics point of view, you would realize that the neck problem is because of this there's no space on the table to keep all these papers from which he is entering the data. So every time he has to look at the monitor, look down at the papers, again look up, look down, look up, look down, and that causes the neck pain. So again, can't relate the cause to the effect. Think of this gentleman. Okay, he's a manager, and you see this huge distance. Very difficult for him to continuously. He has not only to look up, he has to look out continuously, look over a long distance, and he is going to get eye strain. What is going to be his complaint when he goes to the doctor? He says, doctor, I work with computers and I've got eye strain. But what is the reason for the eye strain? The reason for the eye strain is something which you won't know unless you're looking at it from an ergonomics point of view. The reason is that he can't keep his knees in. So the computer is so far away from him that he is having this eye strain, and that is giving him the headache. So you can't relate this lack of knee space just because this is a cabinet and not a table. If it was a table, he could have come close to the computer. He would haven't had no eye strain, no headache. So this lack of knee clearance is giving him an eye strain. That's difficult to relate. Think of this lady. What's the problem? A problem is that she's going to have complaint with the back pain. I work with computers, but I have a back pain. Why does she have a back pain? She has a back pain because there's no backrest. She's continuously working. It's as if she's working on a stool which doesn't have a backrest. But she has a very expensive chair which is adjustable and which has a backrest. But she can't use it. Why she can't use it? Because she has to come forward, come close to the computer because of her bifocals. Because she is using bifocals, she has to come close to the computer, and that's why she can't use the backrest. So when she goes to the doctor, she'll be complaining of back pain. But you work with computers. Why do you get back pain? But you can't relate the problem. The back pain is because of use of bifocals. So what are the things we should look at for computer users? First of all, the height of the monitor. The top of the monitor should be around your eye height. This is so that you will be looking slightly downwards. The way you read a book, you keep the book slightly. You don't keep a book right in front of your eyes. You keep it slightly downwards. So that's how the monitor should also be. Yeah.
Anna, you say that the monitor's eye contact to our eye and the backrest should be equally adjustable, Anna.
Yes. So okay, let me finish this slide. I'll show you. Okay. Then the sitting posture, that's the backrest. Then we have knee space, knee clearance is required. There shouldn't be any reflection on the screen. If there's a document holder, but nowadays we don't have much of a document holder. Earlier that was important. Then the location of the keyboard, that's very important. And as I said, people with older people, more than 40 years, they find it difficult. They have bifocal. Top of the glasses for one power, lower part is for reading. So neither the reading power is for the computer because the computer is much far away than the book. And the computer is much closer than a distance. So neither the lower part of the glasses is okay for the computer, nor the upper part of the glasses okay for the computer. So like that lady who was working, she has to lean forward. So then the backrest is not there. And because this continuous strain is there, people should do some free hand exercises. Mainly what we should do, this arm rest and this should be at the same height. The keyboard height should be the same. The chair height should be adjustable so that the armrest and the keyboard are at the same height. That is the point number one. That's most important. Sometimes the table is too high. So that if you put this armrest correctly, then the legs will be off the floor. Then you need a footrest. But this has to be maintained. After that, you should see to it that the monitor should be changed in such a way, the position of the monitor, so that the top is somewhere around eye height. Top around eye height. Maybe slightly lower. I'm not saying it has to be exactly at around eye height, but it has to be around eye height. If it is very high, for example, if you keep the CPU here, on top of the CPU, if you keep the monitor, like you used to do earlier, if the monitor was straight like this, then the eye becomes too high. And when the back support is required, so that our back is shaped like an S. It's not straight. It's not like this line. There's an S shape. The spinal cord has an S shape. So the back chair also should have this S shape to support the back properly. This is the typical thing we should have in a computer. But most importantly, this is important. The armrest and the chair armrest and the keyboard should be at the same height. Just to fix that, if the feet are off the floor, can give a footrest, then look at the height of the monitor, and then look at the backrest, the shape of the backrest. It shouldn't be straight. In fact, if you see the previous picture, this lady, you see the backrest, instead of being the S-shaped into the back, it's away from the back. So it's even worse than a straight back. So that can happen. So these are the things which we need to look at. Okay. Last point about computers is about keyboards, laptops. Now, laptops are very, very bad from an ergonomics point of view. Basically, they were designed for taking your work with you. But nowadays, that has become the main computer device at your office. So people either they take it with them, work with them, or even in the office itself, they use the laptop. So problem with the laptop is that either the keyboard is at the correct location or the screen is at the correct location, never both. And if the screen is bent like this, it's more likely to have reflections from the lights at the top and from the windows. So what do we do? One of the first things which it suggests is that we use a laptop stand so that the screen goes better like this. If you use a laptop stand which has a cooling fan, cools the laptop also, and this becomes much. See, now the top of the screen is at eye height. That's what we said. And now this becomes difficult to use. This mouse, the mouse over here becomes difficult to use, so you can use an external mouse. But it's not only an external mouse. The keyboard also is very difficult. If you have a lot of typing tasks, then this is bad. If it is only a mouse looking at the keyboard and using a mouse, fine. But if you have a lot of typing to do like this, then it becomes a problem, because remember that straight wrist, here there is no hand tool. Here the straight wrist is not there. Both the wrists are bent because somebody suggested that if you use a laptop, you should use a laptop stand. So the suggestion, ergonomic suggestion, creates a problem. So in this situation, what you say is that you should use a laptop stand with an external mouse and an external separate mouse and a separate keyboard. It could be either using a wire or it could be wireless. But the point is that the keyboard should be at the armrest height. This keyboard is not at the armrest height. So once you keep the keyboard at armrest height, next you see to it that this is at correct height. Then you see to it that the chair has a proper S-shape to support your back. And of course, if your leg is hanging, then you need a footrest to keep it up. Quick examples where we use computer ergonomics: mobile phones. So this is your body size. What should be the size of the mobile phone? Based on the size of your hand. If it is too big, difficult to hold. Too small, you can't fit in so many things into that mobile phone screen. So based on your body size, it has to be there. Then where are the switches? For example, your power switches, power on off, volume control. We know that it is here, but supposing somebody put it here, or somebody at the bottom, put it at the bottom of the this part of this phone, very difficult to use. Because with a lot of trial and error and examples, people have known that this is the best way to do it. Now we know that this is where it should be, because people expect it there. Now the question will come whether it should be on the right hand side or the left hand side. Some phones have it on the left hand side, some phones have it on the right hand side. Now, what is your expectation? Again, whether the power button should be on the top or the volume control should be on the top. What is your expectation? Usually people get used to a particular model. So when you switch from a model to model, then your expectation goes with you. But whatever your model, you won't expect the power switch to be here. It will always be at the top, either on the right hand side or on the left hand side, never at the bottom of the phone. Then this stereo mounted controls, so that you don't have to take your hand away from the steering wheel, so that like switching on the stereo, indicators, all these things, so many controls are there on the steering wheel itself, so that it makes it easier to use, usability. And think of this hand blender, the way in which the grip is designed, so that the handle itself is designed so that you can grip it properly, and the switch of the blender is designed so that just where the finger comes, the finger which you are going to use to operate it comes just where the finger is. You don't have to search for the switch somewhere else, and it can be operated either with one finger or two fingers together while you are holding the hand blender in a good way. So basically, these are the examples of good and bad ergonomics. Start looking for bad ergonomics and good ergonomics from today. For example, I told you about the hand tools where you can't keep your hand straight. And if you see a cup like that, you'll know whether it's a good ergonomics or a bad ergonomics. Thank you. If you have questions, if you have time for questions, we can go for that.
No, I'm sure they have a lot of questions.
Yeah,
but Dr. Ganguly, really, it was very insightful. And, it goes beyond our expectation of what ergonomics is,
Yeah, and I've told you just a part of it.
Yeah. I can guess that. Oh, my God. This is
Great.
Too much. It's so wide. It's so encompassing, the whole thing. Okay,
and it's part of your life, everybody's life, yeah. Go ahead, any questions?
Yeah. Correct. Questions. Because yes.
Tasvia is there. Yeah.
Good. Tasvia.
Anna, you showed the mobile phone model where where we have the power off buttons at the right side, Anna. The person who is making the model should be aware of the human being's usability, or they create the model and human should be usable for that, Anna.
So definitely the designer should know what people are expecting. That's the whole point. That when if you get a mobile phone where the power switches and volume control is at the bottom of the phone, you find it difficult to use. Next time you won't buy that model. So it's something which you use. So then what the screen looks like, you know that where the home button should be. Now you know there's so many phones. The home button is on one side and the back button is on the other side. So that gets changed. So it's a model specific thing which can vary from person to person. But some things are definitely okay. I said that okay, the volume control. Think of something else. Think of the earphone plug. Now, many people put the earphone and put it in their pocket and listening to the mobile phone. Now, if the earphone plug is at the bottom of the phone, then the phone will have to be put in opposite way. So that might be a problem. So everything is what is expected, but that shouldn't create a problem in using it. As long as it doesn't create a problem in using it, it's okay. But there are so many places where just the design itself creates a problem, and that's what we should avoid. Like your switches and I give the example of the power switch. If it is tap, if it's there are many places where the tap up. I mean, there are controls which operate. You want to switch, close the line in a factory. It will say there's an arrow. It will say that you have to turn it. You have to turn it to the right to open it. But so in an emergency situation, it will go back like your that fire engine door. These things will happen in an emergency situation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, any more questions? Meanwhile, I found something very interesting that if you have back pain, it could be because of your bifocals. I mean, this is something really very unexpected, you know. Okay, and another thing is that, like, if you have eye strain, then possibly you don't have enough knee space. I mean, these things never thought of it, actually. Yeah, great. So
Yeah.
insightful. Ergonomics is so interesting. Yes, any more questions?
I think it's late, so
Divya,
people are in a hurry.
Bhavya, Deepika, Abhilash, Lawrence, you can if you have a question. Sada, any questions? Because ergonomics, no
Got
one
to learn
teaches.
many things actually when sir was attending. I mean, showing us the laptop bit, no. So now
Yeah,
I was thinking also to get a laptop stand in the school
yeah,
Yeah, but if you get a
because
laptop
really it's
stand,
affecting.
you should
Our
get
back is
the
paining a lot actually.
external keyboard and external mouse. You should get.
mouse.
You should
Yes, yes,
do a lot
yes.
of typing.
Correct.
Everything should be just not a. But by just a laptop, if you use it more than 4 hours at a stretch, you're going to have a major problem.
Yeah, true, true. Great, great.
Because always either the keyboard can be correct or the screen can be correct. Both can't be at the right place at the same together.
Yeah. Florence, I wish Kalpana Akka was here because I'm sure she would have so many questions. But anyway, she'll get to see
Yes, Akka
the.
was busy with the other
No,
sessions.
she made
She
an
came.
appearance, brief
Yes,
appearance.
yes.
I saw her.
Yeah, yeah. She was there and then again she.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Abhilash, you have any questions? Divya, Deepika, yeah, they've understood everything. No, actually, your diagrams were so explicit, and there is no confusion. Yeah, we only thing is that we got many things which we didn't expect, but whatever you shared was worth it and good takeaway.
Yeah, so those takeaway points people should just remember. That's enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
that's
have
most
made a
important.
note of them so that I'll see what they have taken away from you
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Okay.
So I think we thank Dr. Anindya Ganguly because he's been very kind. He's the only guest speaker who's given us two sessions, one with occupational hazard and health, and the other with ergonomics. Right, Tasmia? Yeah. So you
Yeah,
should thank him. Vote of
thank
thanks
you.
from Tasmia. She scored the highest, in your last class.
Okay.
Thank you for your valuable time and thank you for teaching us ergonomics and occupational health, Anna. We learned about real life examples in both of your presentations. It was great to learn ergonomics and occupational health.
My pleasure. I only hope it helps you also in your future life. Thank you.
No, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Especially about the use of computers and laptops,
Yeah, yeah.
mobiles.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are all day-to-day
Technology.
use. Yeah. Great. Right.
Okay. Okay.
Arindo, thank you
Right.
so
Right.
much. Thank you.
Thank
Huh?
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Have
Okay,
a
then
yeah.
bye.
Yeah.
Sada,
Thank you
send
so
Bye.
us
much,
the
sir.
Yeah,
recording. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'll
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
it.
Okay, bye.
thank you.